Welcome to the September 23rd, 2019 meeting of the Board of Commissioners for Radnor Township. We will begin tonight with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you could all please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Prior to commencing this evening's meeting, I will make notice that the board met in executive session immediately prior to the meeting where we discussed matters regarding legal issues, including specifically the zoning hearing board decision over 131 Garrett Avenue. We also met to discuss matters of real estate and personnel, including compensation of township employees. With that, I am moving to the consent agenda. Let me make sure that I have a pen. Do any commissioners have any items that they would like to pull off of the consent agenda? Hearing none. Does staff have any items?
I'm going to pull I off.
Okay. Does staff have any items they would like to pull off the consent agenda?
Well, could you also add, let's pull G off, just to recognize it.
Okay. Trying again. Does staff have any items they want to pull off the consent agenda? Do members of the public have any items they would like to pull off the consent agenda? All right, I would move for the approval of items A, B, C, D, E, F, H, and J of the consent agenda. Is there a second?
So moved.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed say nay. Consent agenda minus items G and I passes 6-0 with Commissioner Borowski not present. Let's start with item G. Commissioner Booker.
I'm just looking at this item on the consent agenda. I don't think I've seen this item before in my 5 years on the board. Motion to authorize police department to receive bids for purchase of 18 Sig Sauer semi-automatic rifles. Is this a unique purchase this year, or is this a regular thing, or is this a change in the arms that we have for the township?
Thank you, Commissioner Booker. We are replacing weapons that we've had in the vehicles for an extensive amount of time. We're also upgrading some of their capabilities, and those older weapons will be retired.
So this is every 10 years or every 4 years? How often is this?
Commissioner, since the inception of the program, this will only be the first time that we're replacing the weapons. They were bought originally for the original program. I apologize, I do not have the exact date they were bought, but they have never been replaced
Is
since.
it like 20 years, or is it 30 years, or 5 years?
It was the year after Columbine happened, sir, if that helps you.
20 years.
It's over 20 years, sir.
Over 20 years. Any, just approximately, what does that cost?
As of right now, we only have one bid. Obviously, as you know, it has to go out to bid, but we're looking at approximately $38,140.
We're going to resell them, trade them in?
There will be a trade-in, Commissioner. What that numbers are, we won't know until it happens. And just to be clear, what we're doing now is we need a nominatory figure. I believe we're asking for a $5,000 placeholder just to put the order in, and then the balance will be due upon receipt, which we're anticipating to be the end of 2020.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hearing no other comment, I'm moving to authorize the police department to receive bids for the purchase of 18 new Sig Sauer semi-automatic rifles. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion passes 6-0 with Commissioner Borowski absent. Moving to item I. Commissioner Abel.
Sure, thank you. When we passed the lease for the Willows Park Preserve, I raised some concerns about spending township taxpayer dollars, the $1.7 million, before we have, before we see signs of the group raising money. Do we have any update on how much they've raised to this point?
Commissioner, we have no update from them.
Okay. Well, I would offer a motion to table this item till we can have an update from the group on what they've raised to this point. Because again, it's my belief that we should not be spending taxpayer dollars until we see, I mean, you can't just give a blank slate to the group and a 30-year lease and not have any benchmarks before township taxpayer dollars are spent.
I will second the motion to table, and I will call the vote. Since it's an ancillary vote, there is no commissioner comment on the issue. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. Vote fails for lack of a majority.
Point of order, what was your rationale of no comment on that? Ancillary, where does that come from? Is that, can you
Robert's
cite
Rules
Robert's
Board.
rules? Do you have the citation on that?
Do I have the citation from Robert's Rules?
Yeah.
No.
What section?
No, I
So
just-
what was the, so you're saying it's an ancillary vote, therefore no comment? That's
Ancillary votes don't get discussion.
no discussion
There's
on
no
that.
debate on ancillary votes.
Is there, do you had any, were you adverse to discussing it?
Not at all. If you want to have the conversation now, you're free to. It's just going to be not relevant to the main issue.
I would ask that we discuss the items irrespective of whether they're an ancillary vote. I don't see what benefit we get by voting so quickly.
Understood. Thank you. Do you have any comment on the main issue?
Well, Jack, we already voted.
That was the motion to table.
No, no further. We're moving on this, or we're going to vote on the issue that we have at hand, right, to go ahead and approve it?
Correct. Okay, in that case, I'll move to authorize Horn Plumbing and Heating to televise and install 2 cleanouts for the Willows Mansion lateral as part of the township's requirements under the Willows Park Preserve lease agreement in the amount of $11,125. Is there a second? Second. Call the vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Vote passes 5-1 with Commissioner Borowski not present. We're moving to public participation now. Each member of the public who wants to speak is free to come to the lectern to do so. You have 5 minutes. I'm not going to interrupt you at the 1-minute mark, but I will wave so that you know that you're reaching the end of your time. Please do state your name when you come up.
Good evening, Roberta Winters, 326 Williams Road. I just wanted to remind the public and the Board of Commissioners that tomorrow is National Voter Registration Day, and individuals in our township need to recall that, in fact, they need to vote, and in order to vote in November, they need to register in September. So please do so and encourage your constituents to do the same. Thank you.
Roberta, what's the last day for registration?
The last date for registration is October 7th. You can go to VotesPA, VOTESPA.com. It's a great resource. You can do it online. And this year, for the first time, you can also complete your application for an absentee ballot online. So that's a really big step forward to make it easy for everyone to be able to vote. Thank you.
Good evening, Dan Sherry, and it is evening. It was a suggestion, it's still the afternoon, it isn't. Well then I'll project. The reason that I decided to come here tonight relates to an article that I reviewed last week when I was in Idaho, titled, Ex-Radnor Township Board Chair Phil R. sentenced to more than 12 years in child porn case. It's a Philadelphia Inquirer article. It's the local, or I guess I should say regional paper of record, and it regarded the sentencing of Phil R., a person who pleaded guilty, and the underlying crimes, at least that which is in the public sphere, involved infants and animals, and suggestions that he had sexually abused his own relatives, and instructions for other people to sexually abuse their relatives. That's what's in the public sphere. Now, at the sentencing hearing, the federal sentencing hearing, there were a number of people in the article described as supporters, one of whom is Radnor Board of Commissioner participant John Nagel, representative of the 5th Ward. And when one reads this article that was published on September 17th, they get a litany of what Phil R. not only was accused of, but pled guilty to, as well as John Nagel's conduct at that hearing, which I'll read. Quoting. Sorry, it's difficult to get past some of the allegations as well as all of Phil R.'s aliases, but his conduct, describing Phil R., was discussed in explicit detail in front of a crowd of supporters, including his wife, that's not John Nagel, his former boss, also not John Nagel, his priest, not John Nagel, and Radnor Township Commissioner John C. Nagel, a former colleague on the board. Quote, "I just think he's been treated so unfairly," Nagel was overheard telling another observer at one point before abruptly leaving during the government's presentation. Asked what he meant after the hearing, he, referring to Nagel, responded to a reporter's emailed questions by saying he was in a meeting and could not talk until Wednesday. That's Nagel. Now, the idea of John Nagel doing something bizarre during a public meeting is not newsworthy to me personally. Before Nagel even got on this board, he was cussing me out from the audience, to which he apologized to the entire township, me accepted. And since he's been on the board, he said things like, punch him out and shut up. That one was directed to Commissioner Booker. And somebody shoot you. That one was directed to me. So Nagel does this. It is a little revealing that he would be thinking it was unfair to an admitted pederast only being sentenced, because Nagel thinks, I guess that's too much, to 12 years behind jail. Personally, I think if you tack on 2 more zeros such that the decaying bones of Phil R. don't get out of prison until more than 1,000 years have passed, that, in my opinion, wouldn't be unfair. That's not newsworthy. What is somewhat newsworthy is that this board, which has the ability to hold commissioners to an above-reproach standard as mandated by Radnor's Code of Ethics, refuses to do so. As a result, you continue, this is not really the time to wave at me. As a result, this board continues to have this type of behavior, whether it's exhibited by John Nagel or Sean Farey saying that you should effing bury Jake Abel, or any number of outbursts that this board has had. That's a lack of leadership. It needs to be corrected. It's the same lack of leadership we saw when Elaine Paul Schaefer was president, when she and John Nagel and Jim Higgins blocked a replacement for Phil R. after this board had been briefed that he was being criminally investigated. That's a failure of leadership, a true failure of leadership. And speaking of leadership, Elaine Paul Schaefer, who also did that, despite being briefed on what Phil R. was being investigated for, she's running for Delaware County Council. This might be a good time also to bring up that when Rich Booker brought a motion to this board to rescind Bill Spingler's award.
Thank you, Mr. Sherry. Your time has elapsed.
After being convicted of repeatedly,
Mr. Sherry, thank you. Your time has
indecently,
elapsed.
speaking of indecent, repeatedly
Mr.
indecently
Sherry, unfortunately, we can't
attacking-
allow some people to speak for more than 5 minutes without allowing everyone to, and we don't have the opportunity to
You
do
did that at the last meeting regarding the gun control issue. Gail Morrison spoke
Unfortunately, your
twice.
time is elapsed.
Hey, look, this really will take another 30 seconds at max.
Unfortunately, your time has
Just
elapsed.
because Elaine Paul Schaefer's in the same political party as you, by the way, the same political party as me, you don't have
Sir,
to
your
cut me
time has
off.
elapsed. You need to leave the dais, the podium.
I'll just close by this by saying that.
Your microphone is not
voting-
on. You need to leave.
Yeah, it is, according to John Nagel. And these aren't outbursts, like in a federal courtroom.
You still need to leave. I'm sorry. Because I can't let him go far. Everyone gets 5 minutes. I'm not going to compromise on that.
We have let people go beyond 5 minutes repeatedly for years.
I have not, and I don't intend to start. Unfortunately, your time has elapsed. Thank you very much, Mr. Sherry.
say that not voting to rescind somebody's award after they've been convicted
Mr.
of
Sherry,
attacking a
please leave.
103-year-old is very similar
Mr.
to what
Sherry,
you're
you're
doing right
becoming
now.
obstructivist. Please leave.
That's better than being an apologist for a sex offender.
Mr. Sherry, thank you.
Good evening, Board. Tony Bailey, Conestoga Village. I have a copy of the tweet from Jeremy Roebuck, and again, this is what he cited. I just think he's been treated so unfairly. Radnor Township Commissioner John C. Nagel was overheard telling another observer before abruptly leaving the government's presentation. When I first learned of this tweet from the Philadelphia Inquirer's Jeremy Roebuck attributing these words to Commissioner Nagel, I must say that I was shocked. Like Commissioner Nagel, I also attended former Commissioner R's sentencing on September 17th, 2019. In my opinion, it wasn't Mr. R who was treated unfairly. Rather, in my view, it was Assistant U.S. Attorney Michelle Rotella, Mr. R's many, many victims. As I understand it, Judge Bailson's ruling on the charge of obstruction of justice was favorable to Mr. R. Also, as I understood, Judge Bailson concurred with the defense's recommendation to house Mr. R in a federal medical facility / prison in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. As I understand, Mr. R was facing a maximum of 60 years in prison. He received 151 months with credit for time served, 10 years of supervised probation, and to register as a sex offender. Who knows? This federal medical facility / prison may be nicer than the federal prison known as Club Fed. Lastly, as a mother and professionally as a teacher guidance counselor who saw students who had been abused and exploited, I had never come across in my career the heinous acts committed against the babies and children depicted in those pictures that Mr. R was viewing and commenting about. For those of you who have expressed that they were just pictures, those were depictions of live children who greatly suffered. They were not dolls. Some of them did not survive those violent sexual acts. Mr. R perpetuated that suffering. Are you listening, Commissioner Nagel? It has been very difficult for me personally to understand those individuals who have put party above and beyond everything, including supporting sexual predators of children. This comment attributed to Commissioner Nagel is a new low for Radnor Township. Thank you.
Sarah Pilling, 29 Garrett Avenue. I think it's time for all of us, you haven't said anything, mostly the audience, to stop talking about Phil R. We know what he did. He's been sentenced. He won't get out of prison until he's 79. He then has 10 years of probation, very carefully watched. As the mother of 2 children who were sexually abused by their father, every time this is talked about, it brings up the trauma. I'm only one of God knows how many people who have either been sexually abused or have been a close relative to someone who is sexually abused. It is time to stop it.
Ms. Bailey, ordinarily, we don't allow people to comment twice.
Well, I
You
didn't
do
use up my
have-
5 minutes, thank you.
You do have an additional 1 minute and 20
For
seconds
for
remaining.
any of
If you would
you
like to
who
use it,
have
you're
any
free to.
doubt about the depravity of these actions committed by former Commissioner R., you can read the bail review from the federal people, the U.S. Assistant U.S. Attorney, and specifically page 6, where Mr. R. accounts for the fact that he abused his own children, targeted children in the neighborhood. And the more suffering, the more pain that babies, children in diapers suffered, the more satisfaction that he gleaned from that. So thank you.
Yeah, and frankly, I don't know. I feel like one of us has to say something. I've got 4 kids, 8 and under, so, and I'm trying not to go off the rails here, I really am not. But when I saw that quote, and I've always had a good relationship with Commissioner Nagel, when I saw that quote, my thought was, what is that? What kind of quote is that? We're elected officials, so when Phil doesn't get voted out, when we know what's going on as president, and he gets arrested as president, that's a problem. When he then he's almost forcibly removed. He resigns, but then we move forward, and then officials are showing up at the sentencing hearing and supporting him and speaking overtly in support of him, and saying he's being treated unfairly. I really just don't think that's a good reflection on the township, to be completely honest. So, Sarah, I hear you. I don't want to keep talking about it either, but I mean, I can't imagine you'd want your commissioner at that sentencing hearing saying he's being treated unfairly and writing letters of support. Commissioner Farhi's here. He sent in a letter about Commissioner R back in the day that I thought was very good, where he asked Jack Whalen to give him the maximum punishment. So I don't want to continue to talk about this. I don't want to get into a debate about this and a war about this, but at the same time, I'd be lying if I didn't say I read that quote and I dismissed it. That quote was troubling for me to read from Commissioner Nagel. I don't know what he was thinking when he said that, given the allegations here and what former Commissioner R just got sentenced to. There were heinous things, and the quotes, of crying makes it hotter and things like that, was horrible. So I really think it was a lapse in judgment on Commissioner Nagel's part, and I really think I think he should respond in some way to let us know what exactly that meant and what he was thinking when he said that, because I can't imagine an explanation for it. That's just how I feel.
Curious that you didn't pick up the phone and call me, Luke. We've had a relationship for 8-10 years now.
John, I hear you, but people,
Other people did.
right, but people want to know that we have an issue with this. And we do.
Thank you. Is there any other member of the public who would like to speak?
Hello, Matt Marshall, 228 Walnut Avenue, former planning commissioner, former interim township commissioner. And it's a very sort of long-term committed and loyal Radnor Township resident. I didn't hear Commissioner Clark's opening comments, but I just would like for the board to realize, the township has gone through a 2-year ordeal. We have had international publicity about former Commissioner R's behavior. And to some of us who have grown up here and who have moved back here voluntarily to raise their family and their children. I just want to be on record to say that there is absolutely no excuse for Commissioner Nagel's comment last week. And I hope the board, at a minimum, would consider censure. I just don't understand how anybody could make that statement. This township didn't just come along in the last 5 years. You know, we have had families committed to raising their children here. And what I heard, what I read in the paper, disturbed me so much that I had to come out and speak tonight. So I would hope that the commissioners take the gravity of the situation and, at a minimum, have some explanation as to how that comment was made. Thank you.
Is there any other public participation? Hearing none, I'm going to move on to an announcement of the boards and vacancies that we have available. We have 2 vacancies on CARFAC, which is the Citizens Audit Review and Financial Advisory Committee, 1 vacancy on the Code Appeals Board, 1 vacancy on the HARB, 1 vacancy on the Shade Tree Commission, 1 vacancy on the Willows Park Preserve, which is not a township board, but is instead a 501c3 to which the township has the authority to appoint 2 ex officio board members. If you are interested in any of those positions, please contact Bob Zinkowski, send him a copy of your resume, and let him know what it is that you are interested in. Moving on to board reports.
Jack, one more item. I think that Commissioner Clark and former Commissioner Marshall are on target, and wanted to say I was on the Board of Commissioners in 2017 when John and Higgins and Lane Schaefer all voted to retain Phil R. as president. I had the same information as Mr. Nagel, and they all voted for him to remain as president when they knew that he had been, his house had been raided, and that he had possession of child pornography. And now we see 2 years later, he has pleaded guilty. They voted along party lines. They needed him to remain as board president. They chose to put politics before people, and they allowed an accused child predator to remain in the face of this township. John, your support for this disgusting person and your willingness to put politics ahead of children leaves me no other choice but to ask for your resignation immediately. John, we're not the only people who feel this way. Phil R. directly sullied the name of the township, and now in 2017, and you're doing it now. I don't think these calls will stop until you do.
Okay, so that had nothing to do with authorization to send a letter to Senator Casey, but let's move on to what's on the agenda. Bob, item 6A, authorization to send a letter to Senator Casey, Senator Toomey, and Congresswoman Scanlon requesting them to contact the Army Corps of Engineers pertaining to Ithan Valley Bank stream rehabilitation for evaluation and recommendation. Could you give us some information on this?
Yes. In my past experience in another town, similar situation occurred where we had major stream bank erosion, which is actually now endangering the roadway that sits within that area. A lot of water moves in through that area. What I'd like to ask is authorization to send a letter to our federal representatives that could initiate, through the Army Corps of Engineers, a review of this situation, which then could offer recommendations and solutions to curb this. This would be a first step in which the federal representatives can get the Army Corps involved. There is no cost to the township for this, and they are extremely helpful in these types of situations. So I would ask that we would, the authorization to send this letter requesting them to send this on to the Army Corps of Engineers for a review and consideration.
With that introduction, I'm going to move for the authorization. I'd like a second, and then we can hear debate from the commissioners.
Second.
Is there any debate among the commissioners?
It seems a lot less controversial than the last letter that we sent to our public official, so I'll move for it.
Is there anything from staff? Is there anything from the public? All in favor, say aye.
Hold on.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see you, Mr. Sherry.
Just on the basis of Mr. Fari's comment, it's actually not less controversial than asking for the resignation of somebody who was publicly reported as supporting a admitted sex offender. Much less controversial, Mr. Fari, much less.
About the guns, that's what I meant. not
You're
about-
certainly the expert on drop pieces.
Okay.
Thank you for that, Mr. Sherry. All in favor, please say
Well,
aye.
hold on. What's the summons, what's the letter, what's the form of the letter going to be? What are you going to ask?
Sorry. Ask for the Army Corps, ask these federal representatives to engage the Army Corps of Engineers to look at this particular issue that we have in the township.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
Motion passes 5-1 with Commissioner Borowski not present. Mr. Rice, ordinance number 2019-10. Well, I'd ask you to introduce it. I'm also going to ask you, I noted in the packet that we were waiting for the county to give us an approval from planning. I'd appreciate it if you could also let us know whether it's ripe for us to introduce at the moment. I don't know, I'm not hinting, I'm asking.
Well, I think that this can be introduced. It's going to take advertisement twice. It probably won't be back in front of this board until November. By then, you'll have the review back from the County Planning Commission. Kevin, when was that sent to the county? It's been at least 3
I believe the
weeks.
county reviewed that at their last meeting on September 19th, which was last Thursday. I inquired with the county today to get a copy of that review. Unfortunately, the county did not respond.
Okay.
So I expect the review to be forthcoming.
But I think it's ready for introduction, and we'll have the county review probably this week, I would suspect.
Okay. Then I will move for the introduction of ordinance number 2019-10, which amends Chapter 280 of the Radnor Township Code zoning ordinance by amending regulations to provide minimum standards for off-street parking for general, processional, and medical office uses. That's probably professional. Regardless, is there a second?
Second.
Is there any commissioner comment? Is there any staff comment? Is there any public comment? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. I guess it's introduced, 6-0 with Commissioner Borowski not present. Moving on to item D. Steve and Tammy, could you give us some information about resolution number 2019-97?
Thank you, Commissioner. So these are change orders for the Bow Corner and Walton Philippone Parks, listed as 7, 8, 9, 10 on the memo. In short order, it was the sidewalk was replaced along the frontage of Bow Corner Park, overlay of the tennis court at Warren Philippone, similar at the basketball court at Bow Corner, and there was a small area that had been paved that requesting to have the green coating placed over these areas.
Thank you. Tammy, since I know you're on here as well, is there anything else we should know before we get started?
No, I believe Steve covered everything.
Thank you. I move for the authorization of the payment of change orders 7, 8, 9, and 10 for the park improvements project for Bow Corner and Warren Philippone Parks to Gessler Construction in the amount of $78,860. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner comment? Hearing none, is there any staff comment? Hearing none, is there any public comment? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion passes 6-0 with Commissioner Borowski absent. E, Steve Norsini, resolution number 2019-98. Could you tell us what we're looking at?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. So this has not been before the board before. This is at Warren Philippone Park tree planting. You may be familiar with the fact that there were trees that our arborists felt need to be removed that sat in front of Warren Philippone Park. They no longer serve their purpose as a barrier or a buffer. So the township manager, Mrs. Cohen, myself, our arborist, we did go talk to the folks who lived across the street, got their ideas of what types of trees they would like to see there and in what fashion and what they would do. After that, our arborist came up with a planting scheme for 26 trees, 10 white spruce, 10 Norway spruce, 6 Rutgers pink dogwood, and we have a valid quote from All Seasons Landscaping in the amount of $18,200, which we respectfully request would be approved so we can get this area planted.
Okay, I will move to authorize the planting contract for Beau Connor and Warren Philippone Park to All Seasons Landscaping in the amount of $18,210. Is there a second?
Second.
Any commissioner comment?
I'm going to support this resolution, but I am going to ask that my colleagues on the board, I'd like to have consensus that going forward, when we have trees taken down in the right-of-way or in parks particularly, that we have a process in place. If it's not an emergency, an imminent threat of safety to residents, there has to be a process where the Parks Committee's informed, the Shade Tree Committee's informed, and then the neighbors are informed. And Steve talked about it, and I appreciate that they went door to door to the neighbors, but they went door to the neighbors after the trees were already removed, and the neighbors didn't know why or didn't even know that they were being taken down. So I think it's important not only to get the residents' support and buy-in, but also just so that we have good governance, that we have the process laid out, everybody's informed prior to those trees being taken down.
I would support that.
Mr. Chairman, I would support that too as well. I know that we had discussed with the trees, the policies with the trees. I'd ask if that can be included within that discussion as well.
Is there any other commissioner comment? Is there any other staff comment? Is there any public comment? All in favor, say aye. Oh, sorry, Roberta. I'm moving us along.
I just trust your arborist with the planting of those pine trees is familiar with the impact of climate change and that they will survive for the next 25 years. Thank you.
Can I add one final comment? And Bob, when these trees are replanted, can we make sure that during athletic seasons that it's known that there's no parking so the root systems aren't impacted?
Sure, definitely will.
Is there any other public comment? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion passes 6-0 with Commissioner Borowski not present. Steve, ordinance number 2019-09, amending the code of the Township of Radnor, vehicles and traffic, section 270. It's the stop sign.
Thank you, Commissioner. This was introduced at the last meeting. This is, hopefully, we're requesting approval final tonight. In a nutshell, one of the commissioners had asked for some more information. Very briefly, a study was done of that area by Gilmore and Associates, the township's appointed traffic and transportation engineer. They concurred that the intersection warranted an all-stop. Also brought on as part of this is there is a mid-block crosswalk, which we deem hazardous to pedestrians, which should be moved to that intersection. So I'll just go right to the bottom of the memo. The Radnor Township Police Staff Traffic Committee, Township Engineer, and recommendation of our Traffic and Transportation Engineer request that Chapter 270, Vehicles and Traffic, Section 270-16, stop intersections concerning the intersections of Sawmill Road and Earls Lane for vehicular and pedestrian safety be approved. There's a picture if you need to look at.
I will move for the amendment of Chapter 280 of the Radnor Township Code zoning ordinance by establishing regulation. Sorry, wrong one. I will move for the amendment of the Code of Radnor Township, Chapter 270, Vehicles and Traffic, Section 270-16, stop intersections concerning the intersections of Sawmill Road and Earls Lane. Is there a second? Second. Is there any commissioner comment?
Yeah. What page is the drawing? What on the packet?
Page 120 of the packet.
So my question last meeting is the same. Are the warrants met for this as far as the PennDOT standard warrants for traffic?
Yes,
For-
Commissioner, that's noted in the memorandum. Warrant is met for the stop sign to be installed.
And the safety element is an additional?
That is an added benefit to the project.
Okay. No further questions.
It looks like there's another crosswalk on here. Does that one get removed or does it remain?
That would get removed, Commissioner. The one closest to the bridge will be removed.
Steve, is this just going to be painted on the street, or are we going to go to the electronic flashing?
This would just be a painted crosswalk, Commissioner.
Is there a reason why we don't use the flashing? I mean, if we think it's a safety issue for residents to cross that road, why are we not alerting vehicles that there is somebody crossing? And I think it should just be standard now that we go to these flashing crosswalks.
Mr. President?
At an always stop, we don't use the flashing, we don't use the flashers at an always stop. Cars have to stop there. That is, because it's always stop, they have to stop anyway.
Do you have something further?
Sure. This is an area that we have looked at. Because there is a trail there, the Radnor Trail and the crosswalk that's there, is we are looking at installing the flashers within that area and a landing pad on both sides. So that will be coming in front of the board here too. We have an estimate of around $180,000. That will be something that will come back to you soon on that.
And where's that location?
I believe it's right within that same area there. Steve, if based on the drawing there, I think it would be where the trail comes into from the west heading east, where it crosses at Sawmill there. That would be the location.
Is that the Darby Paoli?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. Initially, there were plans to use some of the park, I guess it would be on the Willows side for a parking lot.
Correct.
Is that still the plan?
As of right now, we're just looking at the flashing and the trail crossing that's there.
Okay, because I would support the flashers. I would not support taking
Okay.
parkland away.
Is there any additional commissioner comment? Is there any additional staff comment? Is there any public comment? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion passes 6-0 with Commissioner Borowski not present. Kevin, if you could talk us into ordinance number 2019-11.
Absolutely, thank you. What is in front of you, and I understand that the applicant is here, is an amendment that this board authorized start the process to allow rooftop dining within the Wayne Business Overlay District. This has been vetted by the Township Planning Commission and Delaware County Planning Commission. Although revisions required to go back to the county, and we're still waiting on that, similar to the medical office ordinance, the final comments. But the changes that have been incorporated in this have been those changes that the Planning Commission recommended.
I'm going to move for the introduction of ordinance 2019-11. Is there a second? Before we hear from the applicant, I'm going to ask the question of the board. Is there anyone who is leaning opposed to this right now? Waiting for one more person to get up. I just want to save you guys some time this evening if possible. In that case, you obviously have the opportunity to make a presentation if you'd like to, but I don't want you to waste time.
No, right. It's been before the Planning Commission. They've been incorporated their changes as well as the Solicitor's Office changes, and Delaware County Planning Commission also recommended approval of it.
Okay. Is there any commissioner comment?
Yeah, could you run through and outline what the proposal is, and just so you're familiarize the public who hasn't had an opportunity, who might be viewing this at home?
Okay, this is a request for rooftop dining in the Wayne Business Association area. There are certain regulations that are being imposed as a result of that. It has to be at an existing restaurant, and the rooftop area would have to be operated by the same person or the same company that operates the restaurant. There's restrictions on how close it can be to residentially zoned areas. There's safety requirements that are placed in the zone. There's limitation on seating. There's a provision for valet parking in various underused township parking lots. And there's other restrictions on dimensional that meet the WBA restrictions in the ordinance. So that's basically it in a nutshell, Rich. I can go, if you want, we can go through each provision. But as I mentioned, there was a draft made. The Planning Commission had numerous comments that have been incorporated into the draft as well, and that is what you're seeing here before you this evening.
And where would we expect to see this first come into play? Do we have specific restaurants?
Yes, it's the pub, the Great American Pub. They're the ones who made the application.
So in that area, that has a rather low roof, so they'll be able to see some, you would be able to see, I guess, some of the town from there, from that roof.
I would assume you would.
Is it
It's
this-
not as high as the roof. If you've been in Conshohocken, it's elevated, and you can see into Philadelphia almost. Obviously, it's not going to be like that.
So it's designed basically to provide additional seating.
Well, it'll be outdoor dining is what it is. It's
So
rooftop
do we
dining.
remove some of the existing outdoor dining, or do we keep the same and we're adding more dining in this?
It depends. There are some requirements as to where you have to put handicap accessibility. It has to be from the inside, which could result in a reduction of inside dining as it exists now.
But it's not it's not a necessity to do
It's
that.
not a necessity.
So it sounds like it could impact traffic, though, so what are your considerations on that?
That's what we have a provision in here regarding parking in it, regarding that they have to enter into an agreement with the township regarding valet parking and the use of various parking lots, which right now we're thinking would be the Banbury parking lot and the South Wayne parking lot are the ones that are most accessible as far as parking on weekends. And what we would have, obviously, we'd be scheduling a public hearing, and would be coming back to the board, hopefully for approval or a vote at some point.
Is there any additional commissioner comment? Is there any staff comment?
Jack,
Oh, sorry.
fast on the trigger tonight.
Got to move quickly, guys.
Okay. So if the pub is able to get rooftop dining, what's the process then for other businesses? Like
They
this-
would have to make the application to the township and meet the requirements as well, the requirements regarding valet parking and the availability of parking. So really,
So this is a one-off, and then other applicants would have to come forward?
That's correct.
Making the same request?
that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other commissioner comment? Is there any other staff comment?
Commissioner, just is something for the solicitor, if we need to set an actual hearing date tonight, or if that's just up to the advertisement?
We're probably looking at, because of the advertising requirements of the MPC, you're probably looking at November for this to come back. This is introduction, it's got to be advertised twice prior to the hearing, so
Be
I'm thinking.
30 days, John?
Pardon
Could
me?
it possibly be the end of October, that last meeting of October, if it's 30 days?
I'll look at the calendar, Nick, but it depends on, if it gets introduced, then I'll look at the calendar and see if we can do the two advertisements for the second meeting in October.
Thank you.
Is there any other staff comment? Is there any public comment?
Hi, Baron Gemmer, South Wayne Avenue. Just a couple quick comments on the parking for maybe some clarification. In valet parking, if there are spaces that are utilized for the pickup and drop-off of the valet cars, then those should be added to the parking in the valet, because that's often the case where parking spaces are used up for that. So that might need to be part of that. You've also talked already about the valet spaces being not generally utilized spaces, which I think should be part of your vetting of the lease or easement that you look at. Additionally, you might want to specify whether those spaces have to be available year-round, the 9 months of the season, or
perhaps just the time that the restaurant's open or whatever seats they have open on a particular day. It's pretty open-ended there, so you might want to nail that down a little more. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Hello, Matt Marshall, 228 Walnut Avenue. And I was on the Planning Commission when the Wayne Business Overlay District was created. I think this is exactly the type of use that we were hoping for, more live, work, play. I think in Wayne, there's a couple unique situations to create additional amenity for outside dining. And I would just like to remind the board, particularly with the Great American Pub being a very good steward for the community. They keep their property up as well as any restaurant I've ever been to. And I think if there's ever a reason to consider this, particularly in this location across from the Wayne train station, I think this would be a proper use.
Is there any additional public comment?
I just had one further question. Is there any specific, I might have missed it, is there specific cooling requirements for the rooftop? It's going to be a hot thing, very hot up there. So is there specific cooling requirements or regulation that needs to go with this, or is that left up to the operator?
What we have, it is regulated by the various BOCA codes and building codes that the township has in effect and have adopted. As to, obviously it's not going to be any air conditioning, it's outdoor. So I don't know if there's fans, or even if I guess you could have fans if it's hot, but there's no real coolant up there that would require AC or HVAC.
And there's no requirement that we're putting in specifically, just building code requirement, which I guess would be not much, if anything. What would be the cooling requirement for that?
Umbrellas. If I can step.
Plus umbrellas.
Yeah, Commissioner, if I can step in. So when this was being vetted through Planning Commission and various meetings, it was determined that the building code provides great coverage for the township as far as what can and can't be built. It'll dictate the number of seats, the aisle width. There's a special provision in there about heating and what types of heaters can be used if they're called for. So the building code is already designed to address all these issues and questions, and that's why most of this falls back to that.
And Rich, it's not umbrellas, it's canopies or awnings, or spelled out.
I'd like to just say thank you to everybody who's shown up. I think this is going to be a benefit to the First Ward in particular and the township in general. You guys have been instrumental in pushing this forward. Nick has done a great job in making sure that this gets pushed forward. We're moving pretty rapidly on this for something that is not being internally generated, and that's because of the work that you guys are doing and that Nick is doing, so I'm grateful to all four of you. Thank you for that. Is there any other public comment? I guess I'm going to call the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. It is introduced 6-0 with Commissioner Borowski not present. Thank you very much. Moving on to item H. Steve Norsini, could you, well,
Commissioner,
you know what?
Edward Scott III and his attorney, John Snyder, are here tonight to go through this lot consolidation subdivision caucus. No vote is needed tonight. This is informational only.
Fantastic.
Is this on? Okay. This is an interesting plan for you tonight because there are no new lots. There's no less open space, no change in open space. What we've talked about over the course of the years is how there's going to be all this area owned by the North American Land Trust. And so what we're trying to do now is consolidate the areas that they do own or will own within the next 30, 40 days. I've given you a plan, and
I'm going to pause you for one
I
moment.
guess I'll put
Do you have
one
it?
out
That's where I was
here.
going to ask for. Thank you.
Oh, we have a big size one of it. This one, do you have this one? Let's start with this one. Okay. This is what exists out there as of right now. All of the yellow areas are areas that were called NRA parcels, or not residentially approved parcels, that are now owned by the North American Land Trust. All of the green areas are open space areas of the plan that are either now or will very shortly be owned by North American Land Trust. And the part that occurred after we started this project that we didn't even anticipate is that the blue areas, the 10 blue lots that you see there, have all been purchased by NALT. And NALT in December of 2017 put a restrictive covenant on those lots to prevent them from ever being developed. So you now, in the blue and the yellow and the green areas, have the areas that NALT owns that can be consolidated from all these small parcels into more compact parcels for their use in to make it clear what parcels are then, in essence, open space or restricted and not to be developed. The only other thing we have on here is the bottom red area, which is NRA 7 and NRA 24. The configuration line between the two of them is now almost right down the middle, but the developer here, ES3LP, would like to be able to donate a large portion of that to NALT in this calendar year. And unlike other owners of NRA parcels, its basis is what its contribution is, what its write-off from the contribution. So in trying to give as much as possible of that part of the property to NALT this year, we want to make NRA bigger and NRA 24 smaller. So those are the things that are happening. Now, the plan that you have in front of you, you want to put that one up? But at least that gives you something to be able to tell from where we're starting right now. The plan that was filed and reviewed by the Planning Commission had the road that is the extension of Ayrshire abandoned, and the cul-de-sac that is, that's West Ayrshire, and the cul-de-sac that ends Ayrshire right now extended slightly so that we could take care of that issue right now. The problem with that is that if you go back to the plan that you have, there is one NALT lot, which is 4-17, that would not have road frontage unless we extended the cul-de-sac. Well, the cul-de-sac's already constructed. It's been paved, it's ready to give to the township. So to extend it further would seem to be expending money to extend a cul-de-sac for something that hopefully will resolve itself within the next 6 months to a year anyway. So we've taken the road vacation out of this lot consolidation plan. And that means that where NALT Lot 4 could have been consolidated into NALT Lot 1, if the road had been vacated, it can't yet. It will sometime in the future when that road is eventually vacated. But in order to get NALT into as big pieces as possible, but leave that road in place right now, this is the configuration that you see. So no new lots, no new changes of ownership. It's all what NALT has, and it's trying to get NALT
in as few parcels as possible.
Is there any commissioner comment or questions? Is there any comments or questions from staff?
Yes, sir. Mr. Snyder, at Planning Commission, we spoke of having a note on the plan noting that the HOA would be required to maintain the Nault lots. Did that ever occur?
I asked Mr. Fiorello whether that was put in, and his statement to me was those conditions are usually a part of the condition of approval and get done on the plan after that approval is voted on with those conditions. But they are acceptable to us. That's the only reason why they weren't put on between that time period and this time period.
So I would ask the Board of Commissioners respectfully to make that a condition of approval.
I expect we'll get a proposed resolution sometime between now and the 14th that we would then sign off on, and that if that's not there, we'll raise it. But right now, the declaration of the homeowners association requires them to do exactly that. So there's already a recorded document that does that, but we have no problem putting it on the plan as a note as well.
Do we need to vote on that to put it on the plan right now, John?
No,
You would vote on that with respect to your resolution approving the plan, hopefully on the 14th. That would be, there were some minor conditions that were raised at the Planning Commission, and I'm expecting that those will be a part of your resolution.
It'll be on the written resolution, but there was another issue, John, that you and I have talked about. All the Nault properties, the ones that are currently owned, the ones to be owned, we need the conservation easements, the restrictions, whatever's been executed on all those lots.
Yeah, there's one executed and recorded conservation easement that they put on in December of 2017 that covers the 10 lots that they bought. There are none yet with respect to the other parcels that they own.
But there will be.
I can't require them to, but that's what they say they will do, yeah. I mean, once again, this is a situation where you can't require an owner to deed restrict his property, but the reason why we deal with Nault is that they do what they did back in 2017.
Okay. So you'll provide me with the
Yeah,
December.
and I'll talk to Georgia Simos about the timing of putting it on all the rest of the property. Those were the only lots that they owned, so those were the only approved parcels. That's why they put a restriction on them pretty early. I expect that they were waiting for us to get everything done before they then put it on the whole rest of their property, but I'll talk to them.
Is there any other staff comment? Is there any public comment?
I'm Debbie Quigley, and I'm a member of the Ardrossan Homeowners Association, and Hello, I'm Debbie Quigley. I'm a member of the Ardrossan Homeowners Association, and I just want to state for the record that we'd like to have some clarification or at least notice of this change. And I know you're asking for, this is preliminary, but the fact that the homeowners might be asked to maintain this property at some point in the very near future. We just need to have more information. Thank you.
As I said, that's a part of the declaration and has been a part of the declaration since 2014 when it was first filed, and we're happy to make sure that the homeowners understand that.
And that sounds like a pre-existing obligation of the HOA, and I get that, but it also sounds like there's some slippage in terms of who knows what, so maybe you could circle back with the residents and make sure. Great.
Also, one other question, Steve. Is there any roads that will be private roads owned and operated by the HOA, or these, all the roads here are all dedicated, correct?
No, there are private drives, there are private roads. We're actually going through the dedication process right now. The builder is, the developer is, our inspectors are out there, they're paving roads, and we'll be getting prepared to come with deeds of dedication to this board by the end of this year.
Can we make specific note of the roads that are not township roads and are required to be maintained by the HOA, so we memorialize
Sure.
that that's the specific locations?
Commissioner,
Sure. There's
we-
only one road that is not intended to be a public road, and that is this one that's called Murray Lane. That is a private road. There are private driveways which serve up to 3 lots and are not roads, they're driveways. The driveway that serves 1, 11, 12, and 13, the driveway that serves lots 1, 14, 15, 16, and the driveway that serves lots 1, 1, 2, and 3 are driveways, not roads.
So Commissioner, we asked for a color-coded map, not for just our benefit, but for Public Works, for snow plowing, because the private driveways look like roads.
Right.
They're sizable. So when this is all said and done, there will be a color-coded map that shows what is our responsibility. So engineering, Public Works, codes, police, everybody will have that, and we'll be able to see what is a township-owned road and what is not.
And again, those 4 roads that council identified, the one road and then the driveways that serve the 3, those should all be specifically noted as maintained by the HOA and the note put on the plan, if nothing else, to make sure that all the homeowners see that and recognize it, in addition to our normal location.
And there actually is that, and there's a specific, one of the recorded sheets from 2014 shows all of them and the way in which the easements work on there, the responsibilities for them, and then the homeowners association documents have provisions as to their maintenance and how the maintenance is done by the association but proportionately charged to the 3 landowners that those driveways serve, so that the driveways don't end up being an issue between the owners as to whether they get maintained or how they get maintained. They get maintained by the homeowners association as a limited common expense to those homeowners.
Understood. Again, to make it abundantly clear, if we have that on the plan as well, I think that would be helpful.
We do. We do. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
We not only have it on the plan, we have a full-size sheet with those specific areas just separately shown.
All right. And we still need that color-coded, we just so 30 years from now, it'll be clear, everybody will be able to look at it and remember what we agreed.
Absolutely, Commissioner.
All right.
And we understand that that's part of the dedication process that we're working with staff on.
Is there any additional public comment?
Could I go back on one item, please? Bob, you and Steve, given the situation we're dealing with in my ward with a particular HOA, do you feel comfortable that some of this information is embodied in the HOA rules rather than being documented elsewhere?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I know there have been some residents that have raised questions. Even as of today, there was an email regarding that, if that's all incorporated within there. So that would be something I would guess that John would work with Mr. Snyder there and actually look at this.
I believe I have a copy of the HOA documents. I'm not sure. There was a lot of documents that were produced in 2014. If not, I think
Yes, you have the homeowners association documents, but what occurs with every section that goes on are supplemental declarations.
Right.
And I will undertake.
I don't have those.
I will undertake to have a packet sent to you this week.
Okay. And that'll be a condition of the resolution, too. That'll be part of the resolution.
Sure.
Is there any additional public comment? Hearing none, since we do not vote on this, let's move on to item I. Thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for being here. Steve Norsini, Resolution 2019-99, which is 733-741 Harrison Road, which is a final minor subdivision plan.
Yes, Commissioner, we're just looking to see if the applicant is in the audience, and we're going to entrust Mr. Fiorello to step through this minor subdivision.
Would you, are you prepared now, or would you like us to move you to the end? We only have 2 other items, but.
I'd like to get this over with. I think
Okay.
this is a minor item. It is a lot or a lot line change plan. The Wentz family owns both lots. They have the house at 733 Harrison, and they own the property next door, and this plan is to transfer roughly a quarter of an acre from one lot to the other. It's a lot line change. There's no development being proposed. It's a matter of just flipping some property, making one lot larger, one lot smaller. The nonconformity, right now, the nonconformity, the smaller lot is just shy of an acre, 0.99 acres. So by the addition of the roughly 0.2 acres from one lot to the other brings the smaller lot into conformance, yes.
What's the reason?
Mrs. Wentz's daughter is purchasing the property next door, building a house there. The larger lot gives them a little bit more room for that house, gives them a little bit more room to add some impervious cover to the lot.
Dave, is there there's nobody from the public that was concerned about this, right? Any of the neighbors?
My understanding, Rich, is Will from my office was here at the caucus last time. There was no concern from any of the neighbors.
Commissioners, this is just moving a line on a sheet of paper. So from the outside, there's nothing noticeable on the ground.
I will forewarn you, I'm going to vote in favor of this now. I will forewarn you that it's my instinct that on stormwater waivers, which you're not asking for right now,
Correct.
I get, we generally speaking, our experience is we hand out stormwater waivers to everyone who asks for one, and you can ask questions about why we do that or whatever else. But in this instance, you're already getting the benefit of the lot line change in order to allow additional development.
Correct. And as part of that, we will come in. There is actually a grading permit on file with the township that was issued with the lot being a smaller size. The homeowners are considering adding a larger patio. Stormwater, we did perk tests as part of the grading permit. We had very good perk tests. There will be no requests for any waivers for any additional stormwater management.
Okay, so.
We will be providing that as part of the plan.
Perfect. My threat was going to be that I would vote against a waiver for the first time if this came up for a stormwater waiver. You're saying it perks, so you're not going to need one, so it won't be an issue.
That is correct. In fact, when the owners have been talking about this lot line change, when we prepared our original calculations, did our original design, we took the possibility of additional impervious into account. Our stormwater system was designed for that. And again, we did get good percolation through our tests. There will be no need to come back here and seek any waiver requests.
Perfect. Is there any additional commissioner comment? Is there any staff comment? Is there any public comment? Hearing none, I will call the vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Vote passes 6-0 with Commissioner Borowski not present.
Thank you very much.
Moving on to item J, 155 King of Prussia Road Caucus. There will be no vote. As a result, Mr. Kaplan, if you could tell us what we're looking at.
Mr. Kissinger, please come up here with me. I don't know how many times this board has seen this plan, but we received final plan approval when Penn got its approval. It showed exactly
what we have here, the 3 buildings, the Penn building, an office building in the front, and a proposed hotel along the side. Financial subdivision plan was approved to break this up into 2 units between Penn and Brandywine. We are now at the point where Brandywine is going to build its office building, and a third party will build the hotel. I think it's public knowledge that Toll will be the hotel developer. And we're just here to draw the same lines. John, my partner, my daughter sent you the cross easement agreement. And, yeah, and whatever comments you have, we'll resolve them before we record the plan. Mike corrected the 2 or 3 tiny errors in the meets and bounds descriptions between the 2 properties. So this is about as clean as it is, and we'd like to get approvals so we can continue to move on and build what we believe will be a really first-class multi-use project.
Can I get a copy of the cross easement agreement, John? Could you email me that?
Any additional commissioner comment?
Mr. Kaplan, you said it's going to be a first-class facility, mixed-use facility. So why do you say that? What makes you say that? What's the first-class elements? Walk me through. Make the sale.
Rich, I made a comment. We comply with everything. I really don't want to make this into a controversy. It's obvious.
I'm just asking a question about what's first class.
I think it's obvious to everybody that Penn is building a first-class medical facility here. Brandywine owns 3 or 4 million square feet of space, and we're using the same architect that Penn used. And in my view, there's no finer development organization around than Toll, and Toll is in the apartment business, and Toll has elected to go into the hotel business. And the man who is running the hotel business for Toll, John DePaul, is a very experienced hotel operator, and Toll will build a first-class facility here, however you want to define it. This is probably the premier location in the suburbs today. So it will call for a first-class product, and you've got 3 premier developers here. There's nobody better on the medical side than Penn, and I am prejudiced because I've represented Brandywine and Penn and Toll for so long. We're going to get a first-class project here. So I can't take you through the nits and lice, but we're using the same architect, Ballinger, which is a first-class organization. So, and to be crass, the land is so expensive that will have to be first class. So I don't have anything more to say, Rich.
You know, I know John DePaul, and I play golf with him quite a bit. And this hotel, is it going to be like Sofitel or Ritz-Carlton, or is it going to be like Best Western?
Well, I don't know, but I know enough about the hotel business that you can't pay the price that Toll is paying and have Best Western, just to answer your question.
Not that anything's wrong with Best Western.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get, I didn't mean, well, in the world of between Sofitel and Best Western, I think we would Well, at least Rich would pick Best Western. So if you played,
I would pick Best Western for what?
No, I didn't say you would. This
No,
is getting
no,
silly, but if you play golf with John that often,
Yeah.
ask him.
You know what, I will bring it up. I'll mention it. And, but for the public, I'm trying to give this public a sense of what, even when you say a first-class hotel, I would think that we would have something closer to Ritz-Carlton than to Best Western. So that's,
That's John's choice. I'm sure it's going to be a major flagged hotel. And my prejudice, my belief is that this will be somewhere in the upper end of the hotel spectrum.
Is there anything you can tell us? What's going on with the property next door, the Racket? Is there any discussions there? Any future?
Not that I know of, but I can't tell you that I know anything.
And in front of this portion of the property, there is a very large retaining wall, concrete retaining wall. It's on the bottom of this picture you're showing right there. It's next to the sidewalk. Is that wall going to remain that stark concrete, or can they put some kind of stone or some kind of facing on there to make it look a little nicer? And do you know what the plan is for that, if there is anything?
I don't. Do you, Mike?
There is no plan to increase it. It was designed to match kind of the architecture. There is a bus stops to be placed, and landscaping has to be placed at this point. So I do believe that it'll be, there is landscaping to be placed in that area and the bus stop, but I don't believe there's any treatments planned. But again, that's not part of this application. That would be a conversation for Penn.
If you could bring it to Penn, maybe they could discuss some facing for that. It's very stark, especially now when there's nothing else there. And it's a large concrete wall, so in front of the first-class hotel, I think it would be nice to have some decorative facing in addition to the landscaping and the bus stop.
Is there any additional commissioner comment? Is there any staff comment? Is there any public comment? There being no vote on this, we're moving on to item K. Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. Steve Norsini, resolution number 2019-100, authorizing payment of change order number 1 to Gessler Construction for ADA ramps in connection with the Wayne Business Overlay District tree planting and street adjacent parking lot resurfacing project. Could you walk us in?
Thank you, Commissioner. At a previous meeting, the resurfacing of the WBOD street adjacent parking was discussed, and a request was made from the board to address the handicap parking. Staff has done that. This was based on a request by the resident, but it also had us evaluate the other handicap parking throughout the WBOD. So we will, this change order is to install 9 handicap parking areas, replacing some, adding others throughout the WBOD. This price includes the creation of the ramp as well as the painting, the pavement markings that will go on the spot. There's a couple doubles, there's a bunch of singles. They're all basically in the same areas that they were, but in order to get the actual ADA ramp in, we did have to move some to different areas because there's drains or gas lines or electric lines in the way.
I'll move for the authorization of payment of change order number 1, which is resolution number 2019-100. Is there any second?
Second.
Is there any commissioner comment? In that case, I'm going to comment to say that I have had a couple of residents approach me about parking issues in that area, and each of them have told me that they qualify for the handicap standards, but they have not chosen to apply for a placard, specifically because they feel that doing so would cross some kind of psychological boundary, which I 100% understand. Nevertheless, I want to point out that by adding additional handicap parking spaces in Wayne, the WBA is going to, not just the WBA, all the merchants in Wayne is going to deal with, if there are not people with placards to take advantage of those spots, they're going to be in a position where there are going to be empty, unused spots. they're going to have patrons who are going to walk farther, and those people are going to go down the street to another area. We must make this change. We have to be ADA compliant. It's not optional. There are residents who need the additional help in order to get from where they are parked to the store, and all of our merchants want the parking spaces to be fully occupied at all times. This is a situation that cries out to resolve itself. If you qualify, if you need the additional help, please go to your doctor, please go to whoever you need to talk to in order to get a placard, and let's make sure that those spots are filled as often as possible for everybody's benefit. Is there any additional commissioner comment? Is there any staff comment? Is there any public comment? Hearing none, I will call the vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. All against say nay. Vote passes 6-0. Are there any standing committees of the board with reports?
I would mention public health. The board had a really good presentation about vaping by a doctor, a pulmonologist from Bryn Mawr Hospital. He had actually had 2 cases the previous weekend of problems resulting from vaping. It's available on Radnor channel. I'd encourage everyone to take a look at it.
Are there any additional reports? Is there any new business?
Yes.
Commissioner Larkin, I just have one comment. And I tend not to speak out on what tends to be partisan issues, but listening to residents tonight, listening to fellow commissioners, the repeating of the article quoting Commissioner Nagel's comments, as a father of 4 young boys, just sticks in my gut. And I feel like, if we don't say anything, we accept these positions and we allow them to occur, and they continue to occur, and it continues to make Radnor and this board look bad. So while I was not on the board in 2017, I find the fact that the previous board chose to keep a heinous monster as president and the face of this board, it's just appalling. Shocking, but mainly appalling. And we deserve a response from Commissioner Nagel. I would hope we would get one tonight. And after former Commissioner R was sentenced, Commissioner Nagel's comments, what they did was, they exploited every Radnor family, particularly children, saying that what happened is okay. Why not talk about those kids who continue to go through the abuses that the ordeals that they experienced. So while Commissioner Booker called for Commissioner Nagel's resignation, which I think is appropriate under the circumstances, I would, and I don't think it's going to happen, I would offer a motion that this board censure those comments that were quoted in the Inquirer paper.
Second.
Is there any commissioner comment on the motion? In that case, I will comment. My first meeting, I was asked to censure Commissioner, I think both Booker and Farhi. I said at the time that I do not plan to vote favorably on any censure motions because the board has a bad history of censuring one another, reporting one another to ethics boards, and I very much do not want to get back into that history. So I will not vote in favor of censure for that reason. I will, however, say that I've prosecuted sex crimes in the past, and what Mr. R was accused of having done, what he's pleaded guilty to at this point, is reprehensible. There's absolutely no one on this board or anywhere else who is in favor of pedophilia, child pornography, or victimizing children, and to pretend otherwise is crass at best. I'm not going to defend the comment that John made. I don't agree with the comment that John made, as he knows, and I've told him, but nevertheless, I have to recognize that Phil R convinced the majority of people in the 7th Ward to vote for him. This was something that was not known about him for a long time. I think there are a lot of people who had difficulty believing what he did was actually correct. Now, we're past that now. He's pleaded guilty. And I just want to continue to stress There is absolutely no one on the board who supports child pornography. There is no one on the board who supports pedophilia. And there's no one on the board who supports Phil R. being either a member of this board or free on his own recognizance in any way, shape, or form. I'm confident that I'm speaking for all 7 of us, including Commissioner Borowski, who is not here, when I say he absolutely should be in jail and he will remain in jail. So I'm not going to vote in favor of censure in this instance, but I am strongly, strongly registering my dissent from the statement and my objection to Mr. R. Is there any additional commissioner comment?
And
Having stood on my
again,
soapbox.
in September 21st, 2017, Commissioner R's house was raided, and we were informed of the raid. We were informed of the nature of the raid. We were informed of the materials, and we were informed that there was no mistake. And on October 7th, Mr. Nagel, Mr. Higgins, and Ms. Schaefer all voted to retain Phil R. as the president of the Board of Commissioners. And again, we see 2 years later at sentencing, Commissioner Nagel offering his support for former Commissioner R. and saying he's treated unfairly. Absolutely factual statements. There's nothing that can be said. It's inconsistent with what your statement earlier was, Commissioner Larkin. So I would ask that we do allow public comment on the motion for censure, though.
Is there any additional commissioner comment?
I'll be brief. I think everyone here finds those comments disturbing. Those are John's comments. They're not mine, and they're his. So for us to, maybe we do need to be held over a different account, but this is John, and John acting on behalf of himself, not on behalf of the board. So while I don't agree, as soon as I found out about the sentencing, I thought 12 and a half years was too short. I think I wrote it's 151 months. It should have been 151 years. But for us to play politics with this, I think it's a bad precedent. And it's time that we, as Sarah said, that we bury this and we move on, because every time that we bring this up is one more time where someone who has a memory of a traumatic incident is reliving it all over again.
Is there any additional commissioner comment? Is there any staff comment? I assume there will be public comment.
Evening, and it is still evening. It's never been afternoon. As to the motion, perhaps Mr. Fari is unaware, but there is a code of ethics in Radnor. There's no ethics board anymore. They were a disgrace. This board voted to get rid of them. But there is a code of ethics that mandates that Radnor commissioners, both in public and private affairs, should always act above reproach. That's the precedent. Walking out when the government is presenting the evidence that Phil R. has pled guilty to is in and of itself reproach. Making the statement that John Nagel was reported to have made requires reproach. Somehow that's lost on you, Mr. Fari, and given your intellect as demonstrated in the public forum, it doesn't shock me. But that doesn't change the fact it's the intellect. Go ahead and smile. It's no more offensive than John Nagel belly laughing when Rich Booker tonight says, I'd like to accept your resignation. And by the way, Rich Booker has some precedent in that. He was the one who brought the motion to strip Bill Spingler of his township awards after Bill Spingler was convicted of multiple repeated sexual attacks on a woman more than 100 years old. Rich Booker takes this seriously. John Nagel belly laughed. You, Mr. Larkin, goes, oh, I don't know what to do with the issue at hand. Well, please forgive Mr. Booker for being appalled by Mr. R's conduct and John Nagel's behavior. Yeah, it's really Commissioner Booker who's acting outlandishly. I don't care whether you prosecuted sex crimes. Your mealy-mouthed statements tonight are appalling. John Nagel is a commissioner. He's held to the Radnor Code. And you go, well, censure. Who's been censured? Nobody's been censured, not at least in the past decade. When John Nagel called for me to be shot, this board would not vote to censure him. There were a couple people on the board who attempted. It was blocked by Elaine Paul Schaefer and Jim Higgins. I think Phil R. 3-3. Wouldn't go through with the censure. Actually, not Phil R. John Fisher was on the board. He voted to censure John Nagel for that remark. There have been no censure votes. You can't point to one. Not one commissioner has been censured. Why do you think you have this behavior? I don't know what John Nagel's issue is. Okay, whether his moral compass is warped such that he thinks that the people who plead guilty, let's be clear about that, pleaded guilty. Okay, yeah, I know you're looking at your watch, okay? Pleaded guilty. Not that the government's case was thin or that Phil R. got ramrodded. Phil R. admitted in open court weeks ago that the reason he was pleading guilty was because it was true. Nagel, it's being treated so unfairly. You don't think that calls for censure? It's not your place. It's not your place to make sure John Nagel, a Radnor commissioner, is held to the Radnor Code of Ethics. What is your place? To be an apologist for John Nagel? Oh, I didn't like it. I called him. You know who Nagel apparently didn't call? The reporter. That's part of this story. Nagel had an opportunity to explain himself to the press. I'm in a meeting, apparently, all day. I can't even get back to you. I haven't seen a follow-up story or any request for a retraction. You think this isn't consequential? It's not merely, just to correct former Commissioner Marshall, who I like very much, it wasn't merely Phil R. that was requested. It was Spengler, internationally. He repeatedly attacking a 103-year-old. Here are apparently hundreds of images of 3-year-olds within a year of each other. No censure. Let Nagel do that. And you put your hand up. Don't worry, there's public comment at the end of the meeting. Could have given me an extra 15 seconds, but I'll just hang around and just remind you over and over and over again, you have to do something about that. A censure to Nagel, who again belly laughed that anyone would have the audacity of calling for his resignation when he publicly supports an admitted pederast. And now these excuses of, oh, well, other people may have relatives that have been abused. That's terrible, but that doesn't mean we don't talk about it and why we don't come down like a hammer on people who publicly excuse it. If this isn't an example of a rationale as to why a commissioner should be held above reproach, I don't know what is. But I keep repeating that. I thought that it should be unanimous.
Thank you, Mr. Sherry. Your time is up.
You going to call me an obstructionist again? Are you really going to take up for Phil R.
Thank you,
and John
Mr.
Nagel
Sherry.
again?
Your time is up.
See you in a couple minutes.
Is there any additional public comment?
Good evening, Tony Bailey. It seems to me that some of us here think that this kind of abuse is something that we can just bury and not ever talk about, think about it ever again. And as a professional, we have all kinds of categorizations for what happens, particularly to small children who have been abused in the most heinous of all ways. So to ask people not to talk about it is not the preferred way of dealing with child sexual abuse. You need to talk about it. And the fact that Ms. Pilling is still talking about it means that she also has a need to bring it up. So moving forward, this is something that the township needs to handle for all future events or, issues that come up, such as this. We need to have something in place so that if we have somebody working in the township, on the board of, in the township, we need to have something in place where their dismissal is immediate. We're not talking about due process. We're talking about immediate dismissal. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any additional public comment? Hearing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor, say aye.
I thought that, per Robert's rules, just a point of order before we start a vote, wouldn't John have a chance to defend himself and have time to do so? This seems to be sprung about immediately. So I would motion that if we do censure him, that we do table till the next meeting.
There's a motion to table. All in favor say, or is there a second? Not hearing a second, the motion fails for lack of a second. That said, all in favor of censure say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Nay. Vote fails for lack of a majority, 3-3. Moving on to old business. Is there any old business?
One item of old business. I, at the last meeting, had requested that we bring up the removal of the infiltration requirement on the stormwater because it is, in every instance, waived by the board when there is no ability to perk. I reviewed that with Steve this week, and we're going to bring it to John for some legal analysis to understand exactly how that requirement got into our code and what exactly are the requirements as a legal matter relating to that specific element. It said the wording is should. So Steve should be in touch with you and go through that. I've deferred having it up for a vote until you've had a chance to look at that. But we need to understand the legal origin of the requirement and the ability to affect its implementation specifically by this board. So please take a look at that at your earliest convenience, John. Is John Nagel going to offer any words to respond, or I'm happy to provide
Not
time.
in old business. Is there any additional public participation?
Sarah Pilling, Garrett Avenue for 37 years. As I left the zoning meeting last Thursday night, our concern being 131, 133 Garrett Avenue, I drove home via Lancaster Pike. And the lights were on at the Villanova Stadium. And I noticed with a great deal of pleasure, there was no spillage onto Lancaster Avenue. They have shields, the lights are spaced. It was a vast improvement. The lights were only on the field. It did not light Lancaster Avenue at all. And it was very nice to see what they've done. I've spoken to Kevin Kowalski's assistant, and she is going to supply me in time with the dollar savings to the switching of the lights. Yes, it's costing their money, but they are already estimated that it will be a very fast payback. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dan Sherry, Wayne, just going to set this timer. It's not that I don't trust you, Mr. Larkin. It's that I really don't trust you. Now, for some context, Mr. Larkin, just about all my comments tonight will be directed to you at the end based on your behavior so far. You said sweepingly, well, nobody here is in favor of pedophilia, or child porn, or anything like that. Just some history. Okay? Right now you have Elaine Paul Schaefer, a perennial candidate of sorts who used to be on the Radnor School Board, running for the Delaware County Council. You should know, Mr. Larkin, and you would know had you not cut me off earlier, that back when Rich Booker brought his motion to strip the convicted Bill Spengler of Township awards, it wasn't unanimous. You weren't on the board at the time. In fact, I don't ever recall seeing you at a meeting at the time, but it wasn't unanimous. It was 4-2. Nagel wasn't there that night. Okay, 4-2. Elaine Paul Schaefer was against rescinding the Township award to the convicted Bill Spengler. Does that sound like somebody who's really against sex crimes? I don't think so. Okay. And then Nagel. He is identified in the newspaper article as a Phil R. supporter. He makes the reported statement that R is being treated unfairly. Does that sound like somebody who is upset with what Phil R did, or does that sound like somebody who's being a Phil R apologist? I would say the latter. And John Nagel declined, it appears, to actually inform the press as to what he meant by that. It was an emailed question. He wouldn't say it. What he babbled tonight is, oh, well, Luke Clark, if you'd called me, The press already reached out to him. And apparently he couldn't explain himself. Why would Mr. Clark waste his time? I don't even know why Mr. Clark would contemplate that idea. I certainly wouldn't want to talk on the phone to somebody who was publicly taking up for a disgusting pedophile. I got better things to do. You talk about prosecuting pedophiles? My firm sues pedophiles. We're suing the Boy Scouts for hundreds upon hundreds of sex abuse cases. We take it seriously. We think people that do that or take up for people that do that need to be held to account. You don't. Your behavior tonight demonstrates that you don't. You're the chair of this meeting. Do you think it was appropriate, by the way, based on conflict of interest, for John Nagel to vote on the motion to censor John Nagel? Did you think that was appropriate? I can't imagine, and I'm a Democrat, Mr. Abel, Mr. Clark, or Mr. Booker voting on a motion to censure themselves. They don't seem the type. Nagel did it, not a peep out of you. Just like not a peep out of you in terms of the motion to censure John Nagel, other than to say, I don't think we should be doing that. To you, the code of ethics means nothing in Radnor. It's appalling. It's appalling. What's even more appalling, however, is the fact that you attempted to cut me off when I was talking about Elaine Paul Schaefer. That's a public issue. She's running for office. Her keeping Phil R. as board president, despite being briefed as to what he was being investigated for, that's a major issue. Incidentally, at the time, Elaine Paul Schaefer was the subject of an ethics inquiry. And you know who was on the Board of Ethics when that was going down, Mr. Larkin? I bet you do. Phil R. Because he's the president of the Board of Commissioners. He was on the Board of Ethics. If Phil R. was removed as president, he would be removed from that investigation. That would have been sticky for Elaine Paul Schaefer. So no, she and Higgins and Nagel, despite being briefed as to what Phil R. was being investigated for, voted to keep him on as president. And she's running for Delaware County Council. That's important for voters to know. The history of people on this board as to what they publicly do. Yeah, look at your watch again. After all, it is only 8:25. Got to get home. Got to get home. Please. I can't think of anything more important than sex crimes. I can't think of anything more important than how this board takes positions regarding sex crimes. When John Nagel does what he does, when Jim Higgins votes the way that he does, when Elaine Paul Schaefer votes the way that she does, it's important to talk it out and allow people to have their say and not provide cover. I mean what I say. Calling me an obstructionist, I don't care, because I'm not taken up for a pedophile. And I'm not taken up for somebody who's attempting to defend a pedophile. And I'm not taking up for somebody who publicly had an outburst and talked about a pedophile who admitted to his crimes as being treated unfairly, trying to absolve that person of criticism by shutting down public comment. Shame on you.
Is there any additional public comment? Hearing none, I will move for adjournment. Is there a second? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion passes 6-0. We are adjourned.